It happens without a sound, no warning, no explanation. On the morning of June 13, 2025, the world wakes up to an impossible reality. Every doctor on Earth is gone. Not just the surgeons in the middle of a delicate operation, or the family physicians about to see their first patient of the day, every single one. The renowned neuroscientist in a research lab, the pediatrician calming a crying child, the oncologist delivering a difficult diagnosis, the general practitioner in a remote rural clinic. They have all vanished into thin air, leaving behind only their stethoscopes, their white coats, and a planet teetering on the brink of a catastrophic health crisis. The silence in their empty offices is deafening, a quiet prelude to the chaos that is about to erupt across every continent, in every city, and within every home. The initial moments are filled with confusion, not panic. A nurse in a bustling emergency room turns to ask for a consult and finds only empty space where the attending physician stood a second before. A patient waiting for a routine checkup grows impatient, then concerned as the doctor's office remains dark and locked. Calls go unanswered, pagers are silent. At first people assume it is a localized incident, a strange coincidence, perhaps a coordinated walkout or a bizarre prank. But as news channels begin their frantic broadcasts, the horrifying global scale of the event becomes terrifyingly clear. They are all gone. The gatekeepers of our health, the experts we trusted with our lives, have disappeared. The realization sinks in slowly, then all at once. It is a collective worldwide gasp. Fear, cold and sharp, begins to spread faster than any virus. For individuals, the questions are immediate and intensely personal. Who will refill the prescription for my heart medication? Who will deliver my baby due any day now? What do I do about this persistent, worrying pain in my chest? This isn't just an inconvenience. For millions, it is a potential death sentence. The intricate web of modern medicine, a system built upon the specialized knowledge and authority of physicians, has been severed at its core. The foundation of our health security has crumbled overnight, leaving humanity exposed and profoundly vulnerable. This is not a story about a disease or a disaster we can fight. It is a story about a void. The sudden absence of an entire profession creates a vacuum that nothing can immediately fill. It is a world where the most complex medical knowledge, accumulated over centuries of painstaking research and practice, has been erased from living memory. The books and databases still exist, but the interpreters are gone. The people who could translate that complex information into life-saving action have vanished. The world is now a patient without a doctor, left to diagnose its own ills and write its own prescriptions. And as the sun rises on this first doctorless day, the profound and terrifying consequences are only just beginning to unfold. The first 24 hours are a blur of escalating chaos, and nowhere is this more apparent than in the world's hospitals. These cathedrals of healing transform into theaters of panic. In operating rooms, anesthetized patients lie on tables, their surgeries half finished, as nurses and surgical techs stare in disbelief at the empty space where the surgeon once commanded the room. Emergency departments, already strained to their limits in normal times, descend into pandemonium. Car crash victims, heart attack patients, and people with severe injuries arrive, but there is no one with the authority or the advanced training to make the critical, life or death decisions. The system's chain of command has been decapitated, leaving a frantic, rudderless crew to manage an ever-growing storm of medical emergencies. Nurses and paramedics, the undisputed heroes of this first day, step into the breach. They work with a desperate intensity, trying to stabilize patients, manage pain, and perform procedures they were never trained to lead. They are skilled, they are knowledgeable, but they are not doctors. The weight of responsibility is crushing. A veteran nurse, accustomed to assisting in complex procedures, now finds herself having to guess the right course of action for a patient with a brain bleed. A paramedic, trained for pre-hospital care, is now the highest medical authority in a room full of critically ill people. They are forced to make impossible choices, haunted by the knowledge that every decision could be the wrong one, the one that leads to an avoidable death. Their courage is immense, but it is a courage born of pure desperation. Outside the hospitals, the fear is more personal, but just as acute. A parent with a feverish child doesn't know if it's a simple cold or life-threatening meningitis. An elderly man feels the familiar tightening in his chest and wonders if this is the heart attack that will finally take him, with no one to help. 911 dispatch centers are overwhelmed with calls, the operators offering what little comfort they can, knowing that the ambulance that arrives will be missing its most vital component, a direct line to a doctor's expertise. Pharmacies become choke points of anxiety as people rush to stockpile medications, only to be told that refills cannot be authorized without a doctor's signature. The invisible threads that hold our daily health in place have all snapped at once. The emotional toll is immediate and devastating. Trust in the systems that were designed to protect us evaporates in an instant. The sense of security that modern medicine provided is gone, replaced by a raw, primal fear. For the sick, the vulnerable, and the chronically ill, it is a day of sheer terror. They are adrift in a sea of uncertainty, their lifelines cut. The disappearance of doctors is not just a logistical problem, it is a profound psychological blow. It tells us that we are on our own, that the safety net has been removed, and that survival now depends on luck, resilience, and the kindness of strangers who are just as frightened as we are. The world feels fragile, broken, and terrifyingly silent, where a doctor's reassuring voice used to be. As the first day's shock gives way to the grim reality of the first week, a new set of slower, more insidious crises begins to unfold. The immediate trauma of the emergency room is now joined by the quiet desperation of those with chronic illnesses. Millions of people around the world depend on constant medical supervision to manage conditions like diabetes, heart disease, kidney failure, and cancer. Without doctors to adjust medication dosages, interpret lab results, and manage treatment plans, their health begins to spiral downwards. A diabetic's blood sugar veers into dangerous territory. A patient on dialysis misses a crucial session because the clinic is in chaos. A cancer patient's chemotherapy regimen comes to an abrupt and terrifying halt. These are not sudden emergencies, but slow-motion disasters playing out in homes everywhere. The intricate supply chains that support modern medicine start to break down. Specialized drugs, medical equipment, and diagnostic tools are all tied to physician oversight. Without doctors to place orders, authorize use, and interpret results, the flow of these vital goods grinds to a halt. Pharmaceutical companies face an existential crisis. Who will prescribe their new drugs? Who will conduct the clinical trials necessary for future innovation? The entire engine of medical research and development seizes up. All ongoing studies into new treatments for Alzheimer's, cancer, and infectious diseases are abandoned. The hope for future cures, a cornerstone of modern progress, vanishes along with the physicians who championed it. The loss is not just in the present, our future health has been mortgaged. The economic impact begins to ripple outwards with alarming speed. The healthcare industry is a massive part of the global economy, and its sudden paralysis sends shockwaves through financial markets. Pharmaceutical stocks plummet. Health insurance companies are thrown into chaos, their business models rendered obsolete overnight. But the impact is felt far beyond Wall Street. Productivity plummets as workers, now without access to care for themselves or their families, are unable to manage their health. Illness and absenteeism skyrocket. The world economy, already a complex and fragile system, begins to fracture under the immense strain of a global health collapse. The disappearance of doctors is not just a health crisis, it is an economic catastrophe in the making. Amidst the chaos, a toxic wave of misinformation floods the internet and community forums. With no trusted medical authorities to debunk false claims, charlatans and opportunists emerge from the shadows. Miracle cures for everything from cancer to the common cold are peddled online. Dangerous advice, like using industrial chemicals for ailments or attempting complex procedures at home, goes viral. People, desperate for answers and solutions, become easy prey for these modern-day snake oil salesmen. The vacuum of reliable information is filled with fear, rumor, and dangerous falsehoods, leading to tragic outcomes and deepening the social disorder. The loss of doctors is also the loss of our most trusted source of truth in matters of life and death. In the shadow of the visible medical emergencies, the untended injuries and the unmanaged diseases, a profound mental health crisis takes root and grows with terrifying speed. The global vanishing event is, in itself, a traumatic experience on a scale humanity has never witnessed. The sudden, inexplicable loss triggers widespread anxiety, grief, and a sense of existential dread. But beyond this initial shock, the absence of psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists creates a devastating void for millions who rely on their care. Individuals managing conditions like severe depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and PTSD are suddenly cut off from their primary support system. Their lifeline of therapy and carefully managed medication is gone, leaving them to navigate their internal storms alone. The first weeks are marked by a sharp increase in panic attacks, psychotic breaks, and suicides. The delicate balance maintained by medication and counseling is shattered. Families watch, helpless, as loved ones regress, their hard-won stability crumbling before their eyes. The emergency services that remain, already overwhelmed with physical ailments, are ill-equipped to handle the surge in psychiatric emergencies. The nuanced, compassionate care required to de-escalate a mental health crisis is replaced by frantic, inadequate responses. The world becomes a much crueler place for those whose suffering is invisible, their silent battles now fought without their most vital allies. The societal cost of this neglect is immeasurable, seen in broken families, rising homelessness, and a pervasive sense of despair. Beyond those with pre-existing conditions, a new wave of mental illness washes over the general population. The constant, low-level stress of living in a world without doctors takes a heavy toll. Parents live in perpetual fear for their children's health. The elderly, already facing the frailties of age, now do so with a profound sense of abandonment. Every cough, every headache, every minor ache carries with it a weight of anxiety it never did before. This chronic stress erodes resilience, leading to widespread anxiety disorders and depression. The collective joy and optimism of society begins to dim, replaced by a culture of fear and hypervigilance. The psychological burden of being your own, unqualified doctor is simply too much for many to bear. In this new world, the very concept of mental wellness is threatened. The progress made in destigmatizing mental illness over the past decades is quickly undone. With no professionals to guide the conversation, old prejudices and misunderstandings resurface. Mental suffering is once again seen as a personal failing rather than a medical condition. People are told to tough it out or get over it, as the language of empathy and clinical understanding disappears from public discourse. The loss of doctors is not just the loss of prescribers and therapists, it is the loss of the advocates who fought to have mental health recognized as being just as important as physical health. The mind, like the body, is left unattended and aching. The disappearance of doctors is not a contained event. Its consequences bleed into every aspect of society, triggering a domino effect that destabilizes economies and reshapes social structures. The initial economic shock centered on the healthcare industry rapidly spreads. With no doctors to sign death certificates or officially diagnose illnesses, the life insurance and disability insurance industries are thrown into legal and logistical chaos. How can you process a claim without the official documentation that the entire system was built upon? Billions of dollars in payments are frozen, leaving grieving families in financial ruin and injured workers without a source of income. This paralysis of bureaucracy creates immense hardship and fuels public anger and distrust in institutions. Workplaces are transformed. The concept of a sick day becomes fraught with new meaning. Without a doctor's note to legitimize an absence, employers are left to guess whether an employee is genuinely ill or not. This breeds suspicion and conflict. More importantly, without access to treatment, the workforce becomes progressively less healthy and less productive. Chronic conditions go unmanaged, leading to more frequent and prolonged absences. On-the-job injuries, which once would have been treated and managed, can now become career-ending disabilities. Companies face a critical dilemma. How do you maintain a productive workforce when the health of your employees is in a state of steady decline? The engine of the global economy begins to sputter, starved of its most essential fuel, healthy people. Social disorder becomes more pronounced as the weeks turn into months. The inequalities that were always present in society are magnified to a horrifying degree. Wealthy individuals and communities can hoard resources, hiring former nurses or anyone with a shred of medical knowledge for their private use, creating a new form of medical aristocracy. They can afford to buy black market pharmaceuticals or access sophisticated diagnostic AI if available. The poor and marginalized, however, are left with nothing. Their local clinics are shuttered, and they have no resources to compete for the scarce medical knowledge that remains. This growing chasm between the haves and have-nots leads to resentment, protests, and social unrest. The promise of healthcare as a right, not a privilege, is dead. The very nature of how we plan for the future changes. Long-term infrastructure projects, urban planning, and even military readiness are all impacted. How can a nation defend itself if its soldiers cannot receive adequate medical care? How can a city plan for expansion when it cannot guarantee basic health services for its new residents? Public health departments, now staffed only by epidemiologists and administrators without their clinical counterparts, can track the spread of disease but are powerless to orchestrate a medical response. Society shifts from a mindset of progress and growth to one of survival and containment. The world becomes smaller, more defensive, and more focused on immediate threats than on long-term aspirations. In the vast emptiness left by the doctors, a new hierarchy of healing begins to form, born of necessity. At the forefront of this new world are the nurses, paramedics, physician assistants, and other allied health professionals. They were always the backbone of the healthcare system, but now they are its entire skeleton. They step out of the shadows and into the blinding spotlight of responsibility. Nurses, with their deep knowledge of patient care and pharmacology, become the de facto primary care providers. They organize makeshift clinics in community centers and schools, triaging patients, dressing wounds, and dispensing what medications they can access. Their clinical judgment, once a vital part of a team, is now the final word. Paramedics and emergency medical technicians see their roles expand dramatically. Trained to be masters of crisis intervention in the field, they now find themselves managing patient care for days on end. They become mobile healthcare units, traveling from home to home, responding to everything from childbirth to diabetic emergencies. Their ambulances are no longer just transport vehicles to a hospital, they are the hospital. These professionals work grueling hours, fueled by adrenaline and a profound sense of duty. They are forced to learn on the job, pushing the boundaries of their training and scope of practice every single day. They are the heroes the world has left, holding the fragile line between order and total collapse. The definition of medical expert begins to broaden. Anyone with some form of specialized knowledge becomes an invaluable community asset. Veterinarians are consulted for their surgical skills and knowledge of anatomy and pharmacology, which have surprising overlaps with human medicine. Dentists are called upon to handle facial injuries and infections. Pharmacists, now freed from the constraint of needing a prescription, use their deep knowledge of drugs to guide patients, becoming the most trusted source of information on medications. Even retired health professionals and medical students, whose education was cut short, are pulled back into service, their partial knowledge now infinitely better than no knowledge at all. This new guard faces unimaginable challenges. They are haunted by the limits of their own expertise, constantly aware of the knowledge gap that separates them from the vanished physicians. Burnout becomes a pervasive threat, as the emotional and physical toll of their work is relentless. They are celebrated as heroes, but they are also targets of desperation and anger when they cannot perform miracles. They must ration scarce resources, making heartbreaking decisions about who receives care and who does not. Their courage is not just in the medical tasks they perform, but in their willingness to carry the immense psychological burden of a world's health on their shoulders. They did not ask for this role, but they have risen to the occasion with breathtaking bravery. As the formal structures of medicine crumble, people begin to look elsewhere for healing. A great turning occurs, away from the sterile, evidence-based world of modern medicine and back toward older, more traditional forms of knowledge. Folk remedies, herbalism, and ancient healing practices, once relegated to the fringes, experience a massive resurgence. Grandmothers who remember the poultices and tinctures of their own childhoods become revered sources of wisdom. Books on herbal medicine fly off the shelves of libraries and bookstores. Communities begin to cultivate medicinal herb gardens, sharing knowledge about plants that can soothe a cough, reduce a fever, or disinfect a wound. This is not a rejection of science, but a desperate search for any tool that might help. The importance of basic health knowledge becomes paramount. Simple skills that were once commonplace, how to properly clean and bandage a wound, how to recognize the signs of dehydration, how to set a simple fracture, are now life-saving abilities. Communities organize workshops to share this knowledge. Former first aid instructors, scout leaders, and lifeguards find themselves leading classes for their neighbors. The emphasis shifts from curing complex diseases to preventing illness and managing minor problems before they become catastrophic. Hand washing, sanitation, and basic nutrition are no longer just good advice. They are fundamental strategies for survival in a world without doctors to fix things when they go wrong. A new form of public health driven by the grassroots is born. A powerful sense of community solidarity emerges from the shared crisis. Neighbors begin to check in on one another, especially the elderly and the vulnerable. Neighborhood watch groups evolve into neighborhood health groups. People pool their resources, sharing leftover antibiotics, insulin, or pain medication. A person with a nursing background might help manage a neighbor's wound care, while another with a calm demeanor might sit with someone having a panic attack. This informal network of care becomes a crucial safety net, catching many who would otherwise fall through the cracks. It is a testament to human resilience and our innate instinct to care for one another in times of trouble. However, this return to older ways is fraught with danger. While some traditional remedies have genuine value, many are ineffective or even harmful. Without the scientific rigor that doctors provided, it becomes impossible to separate useful folk wisdom from dangerous superstition. A helpful herbal tea might be shared alongside a toxic plant that causes liver failure. The desperation for solutions makes people vulnerable to charismatic leaders who promote unproven and risky treatments. The line between community care and collective delusion becomes dangerously thin. This new world of self-reliance is a double-edged sword, offering both the hope of empowerment and the very real risk of doing more harm than good. In the desperate search for solutions, humanity turns to technology for a savior. Artificial intelligence and telehealth platforms, which were already growing in importance, are suddenly thrust into the spotlight as a potential replacement for the vanished doctors. Sophisticated AI diagnostic tools fed by vast medical databases are rapidly deployed. People can input their symptoms into an app and receive a probable diagnosis and treatment plan. These systems can analyze medical images like X-rays or skin lesions with a high degree of accuracy, providing guidance where none existed before. For a moment it seems like technology could fill the void, offering a digital doctor for every person with a smartphone. The initial promise, however, quickly runs into the hard wall of reality. While AI is powerful, it is not a perfect substitute for human expertise. An AI can provide a diagnosis based on data, but it lacks a doctor's intuition and ability to understand context. It cannot read a patient's nonverbal cues, understand their family history in a nuanced way, or provide the empathy and reassurance that are so crucial to healing. The AI might correctly identify a heart condition, but it cannot hold a patient's hand and explain what it means for their life. Furthermore, these systems are only as good as the data they were trained on, and they can perpetuate biases or make errors in unusual cases that a human doctor might have caught. The reliance on technology also creates a new and dangerous form of inequality. Access to these advanced AI systems and the telehealth platforms that deliver them requires a reliable internet connection and a modern device, resources that are not available to everyone. Rural communities, the elderly, and the poor are left behind, further widening the gap in healthcare outcomes. The world is divided into two tiers, those who have access to the digital doctor and those who do not. This digital divide becomes a new determinant of life and death. Moreover, the security of this new digital health infrastructure is a constant concern, with the threat of cyber attacks that could disable the system or compromise sensitive patient data looming large. Ultimately, technology proves to be a powerful tool, but a poor replacement. It can augment the skills of the remaining health professionals like nurses and paramedics, giving them access to information and diagnostic support they desperately need. Telehealth platforms can connect these frontline workers with the few remaining specialists in non-physician fields, like a senior pharmacist or a PhD in microbiology. But technology cannot replicate the holistic, human-centered care that was at the heart of the medical profession. It can offer data, but it cannot offer wisdom. It can provide a diagnosis, but it cannot provide a healer. The crisis reveals that medicine is as much an art as it is a science, and the art cannot be coded. Years after the Great Vanishing, the world has settled into a new, precarious equilibrium. Society has been permanently scarred, but it has not completely collapsed. New structures of healthcare, born from the necessity of the early days, have solidified. Healthcare is now hyper-localized. The primary unit of care is the community clinic, typically run by a team of experienced nurses, paramedics, and pharmacists. These clinics focus heavily on public health, preventative care, and the management of common illnesses. They are supported by a network of knowledge keepers, individuals with specialized skills, from veterinarians who assist with suturing to dentists who manage oral infections. It is a system built on collaboration and making the most of what little expertise remains. Life expectancy, which had been steadily rising for over a century, has fallen dramatically. The global average has likely dropped by a decade or more. The gains made against complex diseases like cancer, advanced heart disease, and neurological disorders have been all but erased. These conditions, which require highly specialized physician-led care, are now effectively untreatable in their advanced stages. Infant and maternal mortality rates have skyrocketed back to levels not seen in generations. An injury or infection that would have been a minor inconvenience in the past is now a life-threatening event. The world has become a far more dangerous place, and people live with a constant awareness of their own fragility. The progress of medical science has completely stalled. Without physician researchers to lead clinical trials and investigate new frontiers of biology, there are no new drugs, no new surgical techniques, and no new cures. The medical textbooks from 2025 are treated like sacred texts, the final word in medical knowledge. Humanity is living off its accumulated scientific capital, but it is a dwindling resource. As new diseases inevitably emerge, the world will have no doctors to study them, understand their transmission, or develop treatments and vaccines. The ability to respond to a future pandemic is severely compromised, leaving humanity terrifyingly vulnerable to the next novel pathogen that appears. Society's values have shifted. There is a renewed and profound appreciation for the simple things that maintain health: clean water, sanitation, nutrition, and exercise. Public health is no longer an obscure government department, it is a central pillar of community life and government policy. There is also a deeper, more personal understanding of the preciousness of life and health. People are more cautious, more community-minded, and more attuned to the well-being of their neighbors. The world has lost the safety net of modern medicine, and in its place it has woven a new, more fragile net from threads of community, prevention, and shared responsibility. It is a harder world, but in some ways, a more connected one. The hypothetical world without doctors is a dark and cautionary tale, but it is also one that reveals the incredible resilience of the human spirit. In the face of an unimaginable crisis, people do not simply give up, they adapt, they innovate, they come together. The rise of community-led care, the elevation of nurses and paramedics, and the renewed focus on shared knowledge all demonstrate a powerful will to survive and to care for one another. This resilience is a source of profound hope, a reminder that even when our most established systems fail, our humanity endures. We find ways to hold the line, to comfort the sick, and to protect the vulnerable, even with limited tools and knowledge. The crisis underscores a lesson that we often overlook in our modern world: the supreme importance of prevention and public health. In a world with doctors, we can afford to think of health as something to be fixed when it breaks. Without them, we are forced to recognize that health is something that must be constantly and diligently maintained. The focus shifts from the cure to the cause. Clean air and water, healthy food, safe living conditions, and widespread health education become the most powerful medicines we possess. This imaginary future forces us to confront the reality that the greatest medical victories are not the dramatic surgeries, but the silent, unseen triumphs of preventing illness from ever occurring in the first place. However, the most important lesson is also the most obvious one. It is the staggering, irreplaceable value of a doctor. The story of their absence illuminates their true role in society. They are not just technicians of the body, they are guardians of our well-being, our interpreters of science, our counselors in times of fear, and our partners in navigating the most challenging moments of our lives. They carry the burden of immense knowledge and responsibility, and their presence provides a sense of security that we take for granted. The empty space they leave behind shows us that medicine is a deeply human endeavor that cannot be fully replicated by an algorithm or a protocol. Ultimately, this thought experiment is a powerful call to action for our own world, the world of June 12, 2025. It urges us to value, support, and protect our medical professionals. It asks us to invest in our healthcare systems to promote public health and to foster a culture of scientific literacy and mutual care. The world did not lose its doctors overnight, but we can erode the profession through burnout, underfunding, and disrespect. Let us not learn their value through their absence. Let us instead recognize their profound contribution every single day, and in doing so, ensure that the dark, doctorless world remains forever in the realm of imagination and never becomes our reality. To avoid you and your family being without medical knowledge if there are no doctors in case of emergency, then you need Survival MD, which is one of the top 5 ways to keep your family safe and prepare for the worst in 2025. Click the link at the bottom of the description Please subscribe and hit the like button. Thanks for watching.